Walt Disney lied to us. What a cunt. It's time for another Disney Deconstruct.
The first thing that strikes me about Pinocchio is that it has titles. A full 2 minutes of titles. As Fantasia had none and instead had approximately 16 hours of talking, the Walt Disney Corporation decided that reading was better than listening, and right they were. Of course, I speak too soon, because before you know it, Jiminy Cricket decides to fucking narrate. And he starts his diatribe by fucking yawning. If he's already yawning, how the unnecessary anal cavity search are we meant to be interested? A full 90 seconds later and our story is finally about to begin. But is it? No. We're going to just look at a fucking house from Jiminy's point of view before he breaks in. Yes, that's correct. Our narrator is not only a hobo at the start of this story, but he's also a home invader. If this movie was made today, before we know it, he'd have Geppetto hogtied and be raping him with his umbrella, Ella. Speaking of Geppetto, why don't we analyze that character a bit? He's a creepy old man that neighborhood children are no doubt told to avoid, who lives with a really dumb cat, a slutty fish, and carves a wooden boy to be his surrogate son. A wooden boy with a nose that looks suspiciously like it could double as an anal dildo. When he starts walking Pinocchio around on his strings, he could have the boy walking upright, but instead has him practically crawling on all fours whilst he follows behind, thrusting at the child. That old man carved a wooden boy so he could fuck its sandy man-cunt, and alternatively be nose-bombed when he was feeling a little bit more submissive. So as the story goes, Geppetto wishes upon a star, which summons the Blue Fairy. The Blue Fairy apparently lives in space. She's also see-through. Pinocchio is turned into a walking, talking wooden boy. She tells him he needs a conscience. He's like, "What the fuck is that?" It's at this point we discover that Jiminy can be sporadically heard by normal folk, and when the Blue Fairy asks if he wants the job, he agrees. Is he listening to his own conscience? Is his own conscience a much smaller cricket who is also a hobo and a home invader with rapist tendencies? I guess we'll never know, because this isn't his story. But that said, I have no doubt that Disney will eventually create and release Pinocchio 3, Jiminy's Tale. After all, Pinocchio in Space was a massive hit. Back to our story, and it's at this point that the Blue Fairy knights Jiminy. If he's a Lord High Keeper of knowledge of right and wrong, what the fuck does that mean for the rest of us? Do we now have to put our moral quandaries forward for him to decide over? It's at this point that we discover that Jiminy is a vague spunk gargler who spends minutes looking at his reflection until Pinocchio's all, "What happens now?" To which Cricket responds, "Oh, I forgot about you." Seriously, he forgets his newly appointed role because he passed a shiny fucking surface. His attention regained, he goes on to confuse the fuck out of Woodboy and then tell him that whenever he needs him, he should whistle. Now think about that. A boy made of wood. A wooden boy. No saliva. Cricket then goes on to berate the poor fuck puppet for not being able to whistle. So they wake Geppetto up. Geppetto now has a gun and an itchy trigger finger. When he discovers his fuck toy can talk, he doesn't seem to question any of the story. However, he does bend him over the fishbowl to double-team him with the slutty goldfish. Because that's good parenting. The next day, Geppetto sends Pinocchio to school. Did he call up the school and get them to enroll him? Probably not, because this is some kind of animated past in a place that hasn't been named. They don't have phones. Does he know what books they need for the class? Not logically, because it's been some time since he's been a schoolboy, and being in a schoolboy doesn't count, and yet he gives Pinocchio books to take with him. And how will he know what classes to go to? Are all the children put into the same schoolroom, or are they distinguished by age? Because if someone asks him his age, Pinocchio will either answer, "born yesterday," or date himself by counting his rings. And back up a second, how the fuck is he meant to know where the school is? It's also at this point we discover that Son of Tree can turn his head around 360 degrees. Yeah, he's perfectly fit to attend a school full of normals. Between the Blue Fairy making him a walking wooden boy and Geppetto's piss-poor, rapey parenting, it seems that there's an awful lot that hasn't been thought through here. And when Geppetto sends his boy toy off, he exclaims, "Hurry back!" And yet, he's about to go to school, which is certain to have allotted hours in which he cannot return. So how exactly is he supposed to hurry back? After the school day? If that's the case, then he's basically telling him to come home when he's done, which is just common sense. Time for 2 more pedophiles to enter. The fox guy and a cat? Either way, they get distracted from ogling passing children by Pinocchio running by. They, in case you're wondering, are the voice of reason in this whole farce of a story. Ignore the pederasty, and they're pretty much the only 2 people who turn around and go, "What the fuck," when they see Pinocchio. Honest John is, I assume, an ironic moniker for the fox. Let's not delve into that or badmouth these possible kitty fiddlers any further. As far as I'm concerned, they're now the heroes of our story. Catman produces a giant hammer to pummel the fuck out of Pinocchio, wherefrom I can only imagine, and I can imagine some fairly horrendous things. Honest John would rather hit his associate and possibly give him brain damage than to let him hit Pinocchio. I can only assume from a writing perspective that this action is chosen so that Pinocchio can make the decision himself. A moral decision, a decision of conscience. But seeing as Honest John is basically about to sell him into slavery, it seems entirely unnecessary. If he refused to let him be sold, would Honest John let him go free? Hell no, he would have had that kid sold off faster than a pimp daddy Speedy Gonzales. 30 minutes into the film, and Catman's checking out Pinocchio's arse, readying a finger to perform an anal examination. Let's refresh on the plot for a moment and put the timeline into perspective. Pinocchio was brought to life last night. The next day, he's sent out into the world without a guardian or a guide. He's then told about fame and acting and instantly knows what it all means and goes off to be a celebrity. Once again, Jiminy proves he's a worthless piece of discarded foreskin. Not only is he nowhere to be seen when Pinocchio is taken off by rapists, but then he's distracted by Honest John's song, thinking it's a parade. He does a fucking dance. Eventually he catches up to Loggy the Boy Wonder, gives him a rant that's entirely ignored. To add insult to bullshit, he then has to decide between telling Geppetto or saving the day himself. And he, as an arrogant little cocksneeze, decides that at an inch tall, he's totally the guy Pinocchio would want to have in his corner, rather than a full-grown man. With a gun. The rest of the movie, all that befalls Pinocchio, every incorrect moral decision, pretty much everything that goes wrong, is his fault. He could have ended it all, but instead, he didn't listen to his conscience and decided that he could save the day. Off to the circus. Whatever wanky little country this takes place in seems marionettes are the big thing, and that Disney's interpretation of Stromboli, who's an Italian one assumes, is as a Semite. That's Semite like Semitic, not covered in semen. I don't know why you'd think that, but I thought I should clarify because that's probably where your mind went. It's suddenly night. Jiminy has only just caught up with Pinocchio, and yet he was just behind him. Woodcock has, in the meantime, been sold into slavery and taught an entire song and dance number. Taught badly, I might add. He doesn't seem to know that any of the dance happening around him is about to occur. Back to Geppetto. "Nobody eats a bite until I find him," he decrees. Is that nobody in the house or nobody anywhere? Because the latter is going to be hard to enforce. He leaves the house to go door to door to inform people about his ruling. I doubt the town pedophile declaring a hunger strike is going to go down well, unlike him, on little boys. Returning to Stromboli, some shit happens. He puts Dildo Nose in a cage, threatening him with a fiery death should he stop performing. This scene, incidentally, is modelled on exactly the same rules by which Hollywood is run. Jiminy totally gave up on his rescue attempt, it seems, and almost let Pinocchio be taken off, until he decides he wants his autograph before he becomes a big star. He tries to pick the lock of the cage, which is apparently like a fucking TARDIS on the inside. Long story short, the blue fairy appears and is all, "What the fuck, yo?" Pinocchio lies like a bitch and his nose grows to obscene proportions. If Geppetto had been around to see this, he'd have blown his load, after he had accidentally fallen backwards onto the boy's face whilst accidentally asking for a reach-around. Although the only issue Geppetto would most likely have with the magnitude of Boniface's snout was that it was so long the boy wouldn't actually be able to give him a reach-around. I imagine that's why he keeps Slutfish on standby for those rare occasions where he felt like being spit-roasted by a puppet and a carp. Blue Fairy gives him a second chance and Pinocchio escapes. We return to Honest John and Catman, who are smoking and drinking. They are, as you will recall, the heroes of our story. They're the ones we aspire to live up to. They're rich, successful, manipulative, and evil. Maybe that's just how my mind works. However, our heroes are now with the coachman who collects little boys. Let's not even begin to dwell on that. The movie is so full of pedophiles, if I were a kid watching this, I would lock myself up and never trust an adult again. Back to our story, the coachman takes the little boys to Pleasure Island, where they don't come back as boys. No, they come back as men who've been raped by a man that looks like Santa without the beard. In case you're wondering, this is how Santa spends the rest of the year, raping little boys. He's on his own damn naughty list, he rolls that list up and forcibly sodomizes young boys with it. Back to the story, it's night still, Pinocchio has only just escaped, and he's now telling Jiminy that he will go straight to school. I say again, it's night, and he's saying he'll go straight to school. Jiminy is fully supportive of this, either he doesn't have a watch or he's a fucking moron. Either way, their agreement doesn't last long because Honest John and Friend are here to save the day and stop the monotony and boredom from overtaking this movie. In this instance, they pretend to be doctors. It's just like Scrubs, but, funny. Jiminy decides that rather than rescue Pinocchio before he gets into trouble, he'll hide in the coach and follow him to the ends of the fucking earth before he has a word with him. Again, worst conscience ever. Pinocchio befriends a boy on the coach. I'm going to call him Mr. Cuntington because I missed his name and I don't really care. The coachman is eyeing the boys up and distracting me with this hideous, lustful grin. "No, Santa, no!" screams my childhood self. I lock that childhood self back in the basement where he spends most of his days. Meanwhile, they arrive at Pleasure Island, which is less like a rapatorium and more like a theme park. The theme of the park being drinking, smoking, and boys being boys. In fact, in one tent we see the silhouette of boys inside boys, jumping on top of one another in a long line like a human fucktopede while the coachman watches over and strokes his bright red Santa cock. Now, I may be getting this wrong, but is the subtext of this whole Pleasure Island scene that drinking turns you into an ass? Because if it doesn't, then why the fuck do all the kids turn into donkeys? Is it just so Santa doesn't have to bring them gifts? Wait, how the fuck does Pinocchio turn into a donkey? He's not only made of wood, but he also doesn't have a digestive tract. He doesn't even have lungs. How the fuck was he smoking? Anyway, he turns into a donkey and Jiminy says, "Come along, hurry before you get worse." So Pinocchio's fucked up twice, his father, the stupid cat, and the slutfish have all disappeared, and yet the blue fairy fucking helps him find his damn father by sending him a letter, which tells him they've been swallowed by a whale. Once again, Geppetto has proved to be an awful fucking parent. Not only is the man a child rapist, but even if he weren't to be entrusted with a child, he'd lose it and get eaten by a fucking fish who lives at the bottom of the ocean. What was he doing at the bottom of the ocean? Why would he possibly imagine that his son was down there? He's a wooden boy, he fucking floats. Anyway, Pinocchio gets swallowed by the whale and decides that they can escape by building a fire. A wooden boy builds a fire. Yes, smart. Anyway, they escape because, as we all know from whale class, fire makes whales sneeze. They get spat up and everyone's okay apart from Pinocchio, who's dead. Yes, the wooden boy with no heart or lungs fucking drowned. And do they bury him? No, Geppetto takes him home so he can fuck his dry rot-ridden corpse. But not for long, oh no. He lays him down on the bed, assembles a slutfish, stupid cat, and Jiminy to watch, and just as he's about to pull his pants down, Pinocchio's covered in magic. Let's reflect on this. Because he got swallowed by a whale and died, he got turned into a real boy. That kind of ignores the fact that he was a selfish, stupid cunt for the entire movie. It's at this point that I'm going to divert from the expletive-ridden critique I'm retardedly constructing and digress entirely. Did you catch the Thor movie? Notice any similarities? Thor is basically Kenneth Branagh retelling the story of Pinocchio. Let's take a look at the narrative. Thor is put on Earth to learn honor and morals and conscience. He fails once, he fails twice, and then by performing one solitary act of wankery, he's transformed into a real boy. Although in the case of Thor, the real boy is a flying twat with a hammer. But you get my point. Back to the movie at hand, Jiminy is also fucking rewarded and given a sheriff's badge. A rusty sheriff's badge, one assumes, because he's been a shit conscience, and has basically spent the entire movie enabling and assisting pedophiles in having their way with young boys, wouldn't know otherwise. So that's Pinocchio done and dusted, or sanded, or whatever. Let's all send letters to Disney to request and demand a feature-length Honest John and His Cat Friend movie, because that is a pederasty-saturated film I for one would love to watch over and over again.
Uncle Walt lied to us. What a fucking cunt. Has proven by this Disney. Deconstruct. He raped our minds and our childhoods. We've exposed his lies for the better good. That racist, rapist, kitty, fiddling cocko may be dead, but that don't mean we can slap him upside the